want to introduce our speaker today. This is Matt Badgley, and he's going to be speaking to us about continuous improve your way to badass. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A channel. And just remember, if you want to speak to just a panelist, use the panelist drop-down. If you want to speak to all attendees, just drop down to select panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your question. Otherwise, I will not delay any further. Matt, do you want to kick us off now?
Sure, absolutely.
Right. I will stop my share.
Great. You guys give me 1 second. I'm going to try to share my computer sound. Sometimes this does not go awesome but we'll see what happens. Hey, Michelle, would you mind giving me a little audio check to see if I can hear you?
Test, can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Thank you.
Perfect.
So let me go ahead and just jump right in. So first off, you can see the topic, and I'll tell you kind of the inspiration of the topic. And I want to say thank you guys for coming today. So excited that we, Agile Day Atlanta, I appreciate all the organizers. I know it's a big deal, and it's really cool that we're able to pull this off. So I appreciate you guys doing the efforts and you guys showing up today. So hope you enjoy, and I know I enjoy it. So so just a little bit about myself. My name is Matt Badgley. I'm a coach, trainer, facilitator. You know, I'm in that arena, right? I help consult things. You can see a picture, you can see my face, but I love the beach, stuff like that, and I try to fish, but I'm not the best fisherman, so I just kind of let them do that. So watch the lines. There's multiple ways you can reach me. I have of course, a Twitter account. It's Agile Bacon Beer. Been around for a while. I'm also out there on LinkedIn, and I'd just love to hear from anybody. So if after this, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit me up, and we can talk. I think that having a good community of people is one of the core messages hopefully you're going to hear coming out of this topic today. So I want to start out by, of course, let's just get you guys involved, and hopefully you guys have used this tool called Mentimeter. So if you don't mind, just break open a browser window, or you can use your iPhone or your Android, just your mobile phone, and go to www.menti.com, and the code is 8827293. Tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to it, and I can show a QR code. So if you want to just take a picture of that, if you go there, and the question is I'm posing to you guys is, what is badass? And by the way, I should probably also put a little asterisk out here, guys. Sorry about using the word, the ASS word. If you have kids in earshot, I apologize. I promise that's the only word I'll use today like that. But if you can go ahead, if you go out there and just give a quick vote, and I'll shut this and we'll see what kind of response we're getting. You can still see the instructions up top there. So we got 3 people so far saying doing something that feels awesome. By the way, this isn't a trick question either. This is however you view it. And there's really, although there is as we go through today, you're going to learn a little bit, and there is kind of a leaning toward one way or another. But you can probably, at the end of this conversation today, I think if you answered, no one so far has answered being an expert at something, you might still answer that way. So so the topic today is not going to hopefully not sway you one way or the other. It is really your opinion. So. All right, so it looks like we're sitting on doing something that makes you feel awesome. And so maybe you guys actually read this book. So this is my inspiration for today. And actually I have the copy of it right here. This is a book by Kathy Sierra. It's been around for a few years, several years. And it's really aimed at, if you are in the product management space, highly recommend this book. It is, and also if, it looks like a thick book, but it's not, because it's like a picture book. She does a great job of intermingling enough of illustration plus content, but it's a great book, and it talks about, of course, the focus is on how do you go ahead and drive people to your product and keep them as loyal followers of your product, and that's kind of the antithesis of the book. Now, she presents this case. She says, having expert knowledge of all products and the features and functionality, that's often viewed as what badass may be. And she says, no, it's not necessarily that. It's not being great. And she uses this exact example of a Nikon phone or the phone camera, and being able to use a camera, knowing all its capabilities, the f-stop, all those things, and being really great at how the product works and understand the features itself. And that's not really when grabs, like, and when, again, looking at it from a product ownership perspective, that's not what really grabs people. It's what they can do with the product. So I'll give you a great example. This is a good friend of mine's wife's picture from New Zealand. And I did learn that she did not have any filters on it. This is her actual picture, and that's how blue the sky is, which is just amazing and beautiful. And her photography, as she has become, and I would label her pretty badass at this. And she's become badass at doing these things. And she has tons of pictures. She's learned how to, of course, do the spacing. It wasn't because she learned all the great things and what the product can do. She's become a badass at it because of, she's learned different aspects and skills, and has worked and watched other people to have to learn and become a badass. I have a couple of examples I'd like to share with you on what I think is kind of badass. So you hear that? I'll try to turn it up a little bit. It's going to fight with me. Not real loud, but Prince, to me, and this is his performance in 2004, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for George Harrison. His ability to play guitar and bring joy to be. I don't know if you guys saw George Harrison's son, and this is a tribute to George Harrison, his son, who looks just like him. The joy it brought to his face, seeing Prince perform that song. So that to me is badass. This guy, this is a guy named Aaron Franklin. If you've ever heard of Franklin's Barbecue, Aaron has won James Beard Award. He's a self-taught, if you want, I guess you can label him chef, because he also makes a lot of other foods. And he's just an amazing what he does. He actually gets at his barbecue place. He is considered a master at it and an expert at it. I consider him badass at it. He gets lines around the building starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. People line up for his creations and his food. And so this is a picture of him. He recently, have you guys seen the things called Masterclass? Masterclass, of course, is that thing online, and you have a bunch of celebrities doing it and stuff like that, and they present their ideas. And I'd be honest with you, some people are making fun of it and like, hey, who's gonna be the next person talking to? Actually, I've gotten a lot of, they had a special, I signed up for it, and I started with this watching Aaron Franklin stuff, and I've got a lot of great joy out of it. I took his ideas. Now I've been trying to, as you might be able to tell with my Twitter name or Twitter handle, Agile Bacon Beer, I actually am involved in, like, smoking meat. I like to do that stuff. That's kind of a hobby of mine. But I've, never been awesome at it, and I really want to be much better. So I try to learn from it, and I watch the videos, and, after about 5 or 6 tries and going back and forth, I was able to create this creation. And you guys might, if you're not a meat lover, if you're a vegan, I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to, but my wife, who typically does not eat meat much, she does eat it every now and then. She absolutely loved it and said it was probably the best she's ever ate. So I'm not saying I've mastered it yet by any means, but I'm definitely on the road to badass on this. So, and my other really great example of badass, and this is more in a professional context, Beth Comstock. Great book, Imagine It Forward. And what she presents in this book is, of course, her journey on to becoming a vice chair for GE. She's a former vice chair for GE, and how she's helped, coming through actually the media aspects, NBC and such, to not only help drive the PR changes, not just in her organization, but throughout how the US even approaches some things and moving it into a digital world. But then she also got to GE, and she started helping to change how they did innovation, which, if you think about that, GE, which was known for innovation, kind of stalled, and her efforts and just drive and pursuit of, hey, look, this is not right, let's do it, let's just try something. Her story comes through, and to me, it's totally badass. So I highly recommend, if you want some inspiration. Again, product owners and stuff like that, product management, great book to read. But she's totally badass. I'm curious, you guys that are online, we have the chat. If you don't mind, please share. If you do, you have any examples of badass in your life? Just looking for one or two. And if you go to the chat and you can do all panelists and attendees, you should be able to do that. Badass at gardening, Marguerite. That's great, Marguerite. I'm jealous of you. That is something I'm not. Any others want to share? Anybody else like cookers? Badass at grilling. All right, Tim, awesome. Yeah. You know, one of the things that if this is a FYI, everyone online, if you ever wanted to start a totally side conversation, if we had audio on, you just got to start talking about grilling with a couple folks. The next thing you know, and gardening's the same way, right? You know, it turns into an awesome connection with people. All right. So I'm going to ask you another question. So hopefully you still have your Menti up and running. And my question to you guys is, would you much rather be lucky or good? I'm going to bring back up my the question itself, and let's go ahead and go to the next page here. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, there it was. Let me represent. Lucky or good, and now let me go ahead and show the presenter or the voting instructions. So if you didn't see that, you can just take a picture of the QR code or enter the code. And I joke when I put this up here, actually, Diane, Woody, and Doc, you know, so Doc is, or Zajac, I should say, good friend of mine. And she, a long time ago, she sent out a tweet asking this question, and it turned into a pretty big debate about, you know, would you much rather be, lucky or good? Okay, so we have a centering on good and one on being lucky. And, you know, honestly, my wife is in the lucky column. So we always have this conversation, and she always says, you know, makes that statement, much rather be lucky than good. I'm kind of like, I would love to have a little bit of both. And I think the interesting thing about luck, I wanted to share I pulled up some examples. You guys remember this recently, our first sporting event that we saw, and Tom Brady does this shot, and it's actually, I think it was his third shot, and just nailed it. And of course, the funny part about this, if you didn't watch it, he split his pants too when he did a little celebration. So kind of funny. But that said, totally lucky. I mean, this is not his forte, right? He is a professional football player, not a golfer. And the rest of the day was not the prettiest for him, although it was fun to watch. And I'm glad he did. Good. My example here is beat Bobby Flay. If you're, again, I look at me, you can tell I enjoy food. I love food. I love to cook. I love to have, and I'm not necessarily, I guess you can call me a foodie, but I'm not really I love to try anything. So, and the reason why I have beat Bobby Flay, if you ever watch again, we're you know, being home more often, I will turn on the TV, and usually it's the Cooking Network or the Food Network, whatever it might be. And Bobby Flay, it's amazing when you watch the show, he hardly ever loses. Even if it's the most obscure thing he's never even cooked before, he still ends up winning against another really great chef. And so I found it interesting. So he's good. He's built he's mastered his craft. He's gotten badass. By the way, I thought I looked it up and just say, hey, what's their winning record? Bobby's winning record 192 to 116 on the show, but actually Tom Brady is 242 to 70 losses in professional football. So he's actually pretty darn good at what he does as well. Pretty badass. So when you look at luck, just to kind of think about luck and understand. First off, when we think of luck is outcome based. So just like we were said, badass is outcome based. Really, is what you guys all. It's doing something we all feel awesome about. Maybe we can identify what we feel good about, and you can kind of see here is that one of the key things that people should know about luck is but the odds can be predictive, meaning that that is knowledge. So like poker players, I don't know if you knew this, and I didn't know this until I saw these stats and read a couple little books about this. But poker players actually, it's considered 70% skill with 30% luck. So there's still a pretty good aspect of luck, but there is still a lot of skill. We know sports betting. Remember James Holzhauser, the guy from Jeopardy. That's actually his job. That was his job, is sports betting. In his knowledge and his ability to collect facts. So there is some level of skill, and you can transfer luck into skill, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Luck is the concept of what we don't know today. So as we start moving more toward a badass mindset and badass and we are actually moving out of the lucky mode and more into the knowledge mode and more into the skill mode. So let's just talk real quickly about, this is why you guys came. Let's talk about getting to badass. And I'm going to use Kathy's book. So we're going to be referencing, and honestly, some of the things I'm using actually her exact approach. And a lot of times I'll do these, I do practice these things myself. I kind of arrange my learnings this way. You'll see some of the things, and I will literally put up on the same type of board and things like that as we go through. So I've tried these techniques myself. They work really well. Done it a little bit with other teams. So this concept that we're about to go through, it is both for individuals and then also you can use it for teams. So Kathy's statement in here, and this is kind of the pivotal statement about the book, it's, you upgrade your user, not your product. Value is left about the stuff and more about the stuff that it enables. So the more you can get a user, is what she's saying here, to achieve something that they feel great about, that they're going to talk to their friends about, they will then, of course, mention your product, and that will create a loyal, long-term customer. I'm going to say it this way. What we learn is less about the stuff we learn and more about the stuff it enables me to do. So as I move forward, I always look forward to, either, and honestly, there's sometimes I learn the stupid little trivial facts, but I also, if you know me, I've seen a couple familiar names, I'll weave those trivial facts into some concepts all the time. So I always look for opportunities of whatever I'm trying to learn, how I might, how it kind of changes me. So step one of becoming badass, and this again, I'm using, this is purely Kathy stuff, guys. So it's create the definition of badass for your context. And she actually established a template. You can kind of see, this is like there's only a couple little prescriptive approaches she talks in here about, and this one is, establishing a template, and she gives this template, and you can see the kind of the format of it is given a representative task and a domain. So in the context we're in, an expert. So identifying with how does an expert do it, basically, how do they do it? And then you can see more reliably. And she defines more reliably as 95% of the time they do it in that superior way. An expert will do it in a superior way. So then you have to step back and say, okay, well, how do I define this and use it? So here's here's an example for you. Given a situation where I'm confronted frequently with misaligned conversations, an expert is able to create shared understanding between team members more reliably. So kind of, looking at the context of things, hey, look, if I'm a product owner, for example, this might be one of mine. Again, I'm gonna keep relating back to that kind of that product role, creative role. But you can put anything in here. Give you my example. I'm gonna switch back and forth to a mural board, and we're gonna use this today. So I'm gonna, my mead example is given an ability to be able to make smoke amazing foods. An expert consistently provides the flavor profiles that please their target connoisseur more reliably. So that's my statement. That's kind of my I want to be badass statement. So again, craft this definition. Some people refer to this as the definition of awesome. If you've done an improvement kata, when we might refer to the definition of awesome. But I like her template. It's easy and it's broad. Actually, to be honest with you, I like a little bit of the broadness. It gives me some flexibility. Once you define that, once we have kind of what our kind of, if you want to call it the goal, where we want to head with this, we want to break down what are the skills that we think are needed for that. Now, this can be hard, right? This might take some research. This might take some digging into. Of course, if you're and as we get into this conversation a little bit more, the one key thing you'll learn is you always want to lean on and try to find other experts or other people that you consider badass in that context. So I kind of just using the one I showed you my example, I kind of identified these key skills, right? Negotiation skills, prioritization techniques, storytelling, listening, doing visual meetings, all things I think that help get people aligned, right? So I kind of brainstormed this list myself. So you want to brainstorm the list. So I did the same thing with my barbecue. Let me switch over and show you. And again, and this is actually, I say it can be difficult, but like in my context, it was pretty easy. I broke it down to the types of food. So I have briskets, different ribs. There's different types of ribs out there. I'd love to learn how to smoke cheese. People look at me and go, "What, you smoke cheese?" Yeah, you can actually really truly smoke cheese. So I'd like to figure that out. Veggies. I've had some delicious smoked veggies recently that we got from takeout from a restaurant, and then it was amazing. A Cajun restaurant. It was kind of amazing. And then of course pork butt. So there's different types of things. Now, once we've got these large, and you can tell these are kind of large skills. There's a kind of a rule that she has in here, and she calls it, and this actually came from Jason Fried and DHH from 37 Signals, those guys in their book Rework. But half a skill beats a half-ass skill. So, don't focus on just negotiation in a very broad sense. Narrow your focus. Just like we talk to teams, an Agile team, we say, hey, we want you to, keep breaking that down into a small enough granular form of value that we can deliver to customers. Same type of thing here. What's the small granular piece that if I got good at that, that's going to help me achieve that larger skill? So we want to break our skills down into sub skills. So let's just do this real quick. I have not done this, so let's go ahead and go over here and do this. I'm gonna stick with the brisket, right? So, in case, and I watched Aaron's video, so that's how I got my research on this. And Aaron points out multiple things. He points out that we got the actual smoke, and what that means is how it's cooking, how much smoke is in the thing, the temperature of the pit. The thing we cook in, the temperature of the meat is important, very important actually. It drives tenderness of it. How we might butcher it, which you still have to make sure that there's not too much fat and things like that. I know we got to get better at that. Oh yeah, the spices and I put on it, so I got to deal with the spices. And hopefully you guys you see the idea. We break this larger thing down into some smaller subtasks. And the cool thing about when you, of course, just like we do this in a backlog, you will find things as you decompose down these larger skills into sub skills. That these sub skills, of course, might cross multiples of your larger skills, right? They might be related to multiples of the larger skills and benefit there. And I'm using these examples, guys. One of the things I would want to, impose on you guys is go ahead and go back. If you are trying to, one of the conversations I've been having recently is conversations around T-shaped skills and developing out different skills and cross-functional teams, right? And trying to get team members to, be willing to step out and to learn other new things. And this is one of the great conversations you can have them have. This is one of those, have them, articulate what are the skills and say, well, that seems like a pretty big skill. Can we break that down into sub skills? And have it broken down into sub skills, and then have the team members talk about, how which ones are important to them, right? So again, it's really cool. Really, you look at this, you go, that's a pretty simple context, but it's really powerful. So once you do this, so now that we have our skills identified and our sub skills identified, we create a learning board. Now this is going to look like it kind of looks like, if you look at it, you go, man, it looks like a Kanban board, Matt. She expresses it, hey, just put 3 posters on the wall. And you'll see it does there is movement of items, obviously, but it's not necessarily the same rules as a Kanban board but there are some similarities. So I'm gonna go ahead and come over here and I'm gonna put these things on here. Let me go ahead and move over in my mural, and I've already created my board here, so I can't do, I'll put items up here in my bucket of things I can't do. So you just lay it out. It's really simple. Make it, and again, just like we have the same rule when we work, and with an agile mindset, a lean mindset, we be transparent. We're transparent. We make all of our work visible. So same thing. Let's be visible on what we're trying to achieve. And then now, once we've done that, we want to get into one of the core pieces, right? All we've done so far is we try to provide clarity about what we want to do. And we've broken that down into bite-sized chunks. Again, hopefully you're seeing some similarities to this. But now what we do is we start practicing. And this is a quote from in the book, Kathy's book, "Practice Makes Permanent." So, and then she goes on and we talk about this concept, and she points out that it's not just normal practice we want to do. We want to do this concept called deliberate practice. and she rightfully so makes fun of the word deliberate practice because people just turn it into practice deliberately, and that's really not what it is at all. So this stemmed from a guy named Anders Ericsson, and if you ever heard or if you saw Malcolm Gladwell's book, if you read that, he talks about a master gets to that point with 10,000 hours of effort. And it came from the research of Anders Ericsson, and Anders points out, said, well, that really wasn't 100%. That's part of it. There are some estimates around there, but it could be less and it could be more. But it's 10,000 hours or that level of effort, a large level of effort of deliberate practice. So here's the 6 steps of deliberate practice. You guys can read this, but let me go through a couple key things. So first, obviously get motivated. So, and we'll talk about some of the blockers of deliberate practice here in a second, but if you're not motivated, you're going to run into those things that will slow you down. And we got to deal with those. And so you got to be motivated. So have that vision, have that. And that's why we set that one, define the context. And the same thing with the set specific realistic goals. Those 2 efforts help you really set the stage for a good deliberate practice. Now, the next one is break out of your comfort zone. And, a lot of times you'll see, there's I have a little diagram I used before. It says, hey, comfort zone. And then this is where you practice, outside that comfort zone. This is where the good things happen. As I started again, I preparing for this, and I started doing a little more research, and I'm like, oh yeah, multiple times I get pointed out that, guys, you really shouldn't go after the things you absolutely can't do. It can be very discouraging, right? It can put you in it also can put you in an unsafe space. What I mean, not just, unsafe from a uncomfortable place, but also literally physically maybe unsafe. So you need to focus on the things right between the things you can't do and the things you can do. And that's your practice zone, because that helps push that circle out more of the things you can do. And so we continue to broaden that scope. Obviously, be consistent and persistent. So practice often does require repetitiveness, and it requires you to, we talk about conditioning. I love I'm trying to remember the name of the book or the name of the author now. I don't know why she's not in my head right now, but it's the going to the top of the Mount Everest. She led the group that went to the top of Mount Everest, and one of the key things I took away from that, and actually I know Mike Cohn's talking, or not Mike Cohn, Mike Kottmeyer's talking later today, and they talk about, they have base camps, and one of the things that she talked about going to the top of Mount Everest is, and that sparked a thought in my mind, is that when they get to the first base camp, of course, they stay there for a little bit, and then they go to the second base camp and they come right back down. And it's all about conditioning. And it's all about and they have to do that multiple times. And then they do the same thing. They go up to 3 and they come all the way back down. And it's all about that conditioning concept and being consistent and persistent and building and, again, pushing out that circle. The next 2 are really important, 5 and 6. So the 5 is seek feedback. So this is where we need to always try to engage someone else in our practice process. Whether or not, if we're working in an Agile space, we might pull in a coach, or we might pull in a peer. I mean, there's no reason why we can't help coach each other. And I have a really good friend of mine that Victoria Studley is her husband's a good friend of mine, and we often weekly actually usually get on the phone and kind of talk through things and provide each other feedback and try to figure out how to solve new problems. So always seek feedback when we're practicing. Otherwise, you're just you're not really necessarily improving. But by the way, when I did my brisket, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the brisket situation, but when I did my brisket, of course, I tested things with my wife, but I honestly had my iPad sitting next to me, and I kept on rewinding and going back to the videos to try to figure out, to see exactly if I'm doing what they prescribe and practice exactly how they teach it. And then number 6, of course, take time to recover. There's the whole thing that our brains are muscles too. And all of there's the studies have been done that basically show that, I don't know if you know that, your brain is continuing to work into the evening, even though you might not be thinking about or doing a topic, but your brain is still working to file things away. And to organize things. So your both conscious and subconscious brain. That's why often, we'll wake up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning and you start thinking about something because your brain is still processing and trying to file things away. So make sure you take time to recover. So if especially if we're doing practice around professional stuff, or if we're doing, like I said, baking, creating meat, you got to step back and reflect and think about what you're doing. So those are the things to deliberate practice. I wanted to give you some examples that I used before on deliberate practice. And I'm just going to point out just a couple here, just for time's sake. Improvement kata. So improvement kata, if you haven't done improvement kata, this came from Mike Rothler, coming out of the Toyota method. If you go out there and just do Google Mike Rothler and improvement kata, you'll find some information about it. And this is a technique by which they use to, as he says, it's the key to help how Toyota's been successful in implementing what they do. And it's setting that target condition, very similar to what we've done, and what Kathy talks about by setting the given, that statement, my context statement, the definition of badass. So we define that target area, and then we start defining those small substeps to get there, and we measure our progress toward it. So great technique. And they actually, I will, not to pimp their thing, but they have a great, it's you spend $90, you can take a little class online to teach you how to do that technique and also coach it. So it's a really good, easy technique to approach. A couple other ones here. One of the things that I learned about because I've been thinking about this deliberate practice for a long time and trying to both live it and teach it for a long time. One of the things I learned about really early on is that one of the rules they say, deliberate practice is not the art of doing. It's not the activity of doing. And then I started saying, well, I get that, but I think there's opportunities where we can still be getting stuff done and not necessarily be in a pure practice mode. And where I look at that, I'm looking at things like pair programming, right? Pair programming is a great practice opportunity for people, especially if you've never done it, but two, even if you have done it, you can always push yourself to push you and the pair to try something new. And actually the essence of mob programming is, in a way, a practice approach. So I think, when we look at and we think about practice, and like I used to say that, hey, the rule is it's not really you doing your job every day. I think you can incorporate practice activities definitely into your job. There's no reason why not to. One I just read, another one I'm going to point out because I just kind of learned about it. There's a book called Agile Conversations by Douglas Squirrel, and I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. Just came out recently, and again, reading through it, I was like, that's some pretty good stuff. I enjoy this. But they did point out this thing called a conversation logging, and I tried it. And the idea is this: is you fold a piece of paper in half, you kind of write down a transcript of your conversation. And maybe a difficult conversation you had, and I try to remember back to a difficult conversation I had with someone. I went through that, and then you flip it over and you write down, or line up, based off the conversation that's happening, what they were thinking, and try to understand them. And also look for where, was I in a mode of questioning or was I in a mode of telling? And it really helps you understand the better ways by which you might be able to have a conversation with people and make it more productive. Found it, and so once I've done that, and I've done it 2 other times, I joked with my wife because I did it with her, and it helped. To be honest with you, it's great. It's a really cool little technique, and I think it's a good practice technique. Not gonna have time today, you guys, but as we go through the conference today and we have the Slack channels, I would love to see other practice ideas you guys have. You can see up here on the board, some of these are explicitly around a team might do together, like a coding dojo, doing a team level Pomodoro, which is that, more teaching you how to do focus time. Using liftoff cards from Sandy Mamali. So there's a bunch of really good ones out here that you can try, but I'd love to hear other practice techniques that you guys might have. If you want to throw it in the chat, what have you. And Michelle's saying her husband uses Pomodoro and has had great success with. Yeah, Pomodoro. Just to explain to you guys, if you haven't ever heard of it, Pomodoro technique is it's based off, it's tomato timer, and you set the timer typically to 25 minutes, and you basically zone out the world. You let everybody know, hey, I'm in Pomodoro time. And you kind of zone out the world and you stay focused on an activity to get it done. And it could be a couple activities, but you try to do one at a time, sequence them right. And what you'll find it is to be amazingly productive. You'll walk away with because then at the end of, by the way, at the end of 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. So you step away. You kind of, okay, take a breath, step away, get your body moving again. And it's super helpful. And yeah, if you've done it, even if you've only done it a few times, it's beneficial. So it's a good practice technique to help teach you how to focus and spend focus time. So the great thing to say about all that, though, and again, I'm stealing another quote from the book. That this is one that really settled with me: is the experts cannot agree on the one true path that proves there's no more than just one right way to get there. That's encouraging. And so the idea, guys, all these practice ideas, one of the things that I have discovered too, and I've kind of questioned myself on is that, let's make sure that we ask the teams or let the individual kind of figure out maybe a practice approach. It's funny. I always give an example of my nephew who loves to play baseball, and he's a really good player. He's part of all, the travel leagues and recruiting and, being looked at by colleges and others, scouts. So he's a great player, and he works really hard at it. And, but he's come up with his own practice techniques. I mean, so especially right now during the pandemics and stuff and being a little bit more isolated, so they're not able to do as much practice with the team. So he has found ways and come up with different approaches. And some of them you would like on, how does that help you? I mean, he literally will say, well, yeah, I spent a few hours watching videos on YouTube on this. And I'm like, yeah, of course, my brother was like, man, yeah, dude, you need to go off YouTube. He goes, no, it helps me by being able to see how other people do it. So, one of the key things is there's not always one right way. Just seek out multiple and try different practice things. Some of the blockers, sorry, got ahead of myself. Let me finish this here quick. Because one of the key things, part of the, when we start doing deliberate practice, let me tell you how to use the board. You start tracking your learning. Now, the key thing about this board, like I said, it looks like a Kanban board, but it's really not. It operates somewhat where we want to move left to right. But there are also times when you think you've mastered it, and then you realize you got some feedback either by looking at some numbers, or like, I'm cooking the meat. I realize, well, crap, I probably wrapped it at the wrong time. I caused the temperature to go up way too high, and therefore it turned into mush. So I instantly go back and say, hey, I got to relearn about the temp. So it goes back to can do with a little effort or with some effort. So things can go back and forth. The other thing is that's of course very different than what you might see in a Kanban board. Not very different, but you might see is things will drop off. So we'll have times when we're doing stuff and things should just drop off the board. So we decide that sub skill is just no longer important to what I'm trying to achieve, or I think it's good enough. We make that call. And just to play it out, guys, obviously it's just as easy as moving these things from side to side. So if I zoom back out here, as we start, working this stuff and feeling that we feel good about it. Now there is one little thing that, little gotcha that Kathy points out, and I've experienced it myself, is I've had a bunch of things sitting in this can do with effort. And she very much encourages, like from a product perspective, but also you think about it as an individual, we want to try to get things moved over to mastered. If they all sit here, it kind of, she calls it I think it's called the valley of suck. We basically get down to the point where we're just not good at it, and it starts getting frustrating, right? We're just mediocre at it, and again, that might be okay. I might decide I don't want to do this hobby anymore, cooking meat. I don't want to become that guy. But if I want to, stick to it, and if I'm working with teams, definitely want the teams to pick areas that they feel they should master. So make sure that we don't, sit there at the valley of suck. By the way, her book's very entertaining, but she comes up with these little terms and kind of kitschy things. So warning about deliberate practice. So one of the things that keeps us from getting a badass, first off, there's the shiny object syndrome or squirrel that's going to distract us. We all suffer from shiny object syndrome, especially when we're trying to get better at something. There's always something else that we might want to go try to tackle. So this is one of those things where it requires that dedication to go ahead and say, let's stay focused. And also, if we define too broad of an or ambiguous, definition of badass, that might be the challenge, right? So maybe we need to narrow that down. And that's, so if you think about and that's the same way, if we're doing products, right? Working with a product team, if we have too broad of a product vision, then of course we might stray off course of what we want to get done. So shiny object syndrome, be aware of that. The other one is, I'm going to go to the procrastination. It's easy for us to make our continuous improvement or even the team's continuous improvement second fiddle, right? This is why one of the challenges that, as I started thinking about it and started challenging my own thinking about, I can do some of these things while I'm working. I mean, and I should, give you an example of what we're looking at right now. I said, hey, how can I make this visualization just look a little bit better and maybe easier on the eyes while you guys are watching this? And so I tried different techniques that I haven't tried before. So those kind of things, make practice part of what you do. And then, of course, perfectionism. This gets in the way of all of our minds. Perfectionism usually is one of the challenges with perfectionism is, of course, in being that we want to get it. I don't want to do that half-assed job of something, and so perfectionism can actually cause us to not start things worse than finish things, right? Or on the finish side, you might create a set of, okay, here's my sub skill, but you might create criteria around what it means to be good at that sub skill to be just ridiculously long, and you'll never be good at it. So just like we do with, again, working with product teams and things like that, we refine things down to what is that minimal valuable product or minimal valuable prototype. We kind of want to do the same thing here, and that will help fight this perfectionism thing. So if you do things in small bite-sized chunks, it helps us deal with this perfectionism problem. The other big problem we have is our brain, right? So those are kind of behavioral things that we do, but our brain really does get in the way sometimes. One, we have confirmation bias, and you guys have heard this. We currently living in the day and age of on the media and stuff like that, and where there's a lot of confirmation bias, and it's the concept that you listen for things that reinforce your thinking. But it also is basically the other aspect of confirmation bias is, well, I already know that. Or I know enough of that, and that's one of the challenges that I remember a talk by Mike Cohn. So I got he said Mike Cohn's name into my head. He did several years ago back, challenging, and he reached out to a lot of the early Agile thought leaders, if you want to call them, and asked them, what were you wrong about? What now that you kind of lived this thing for a while, what are you wrong about? And we always got to step into a problem that way. Look at our confirmation bias, step back and think that maybe I'm wrong about the way I'm thinking about this, and I need to approach it and be willing to try something more and be willing to try something new, and look at it from a different angle. So confirmation bias is out there. Lack of joy. It's kind of, I was alluding to this earlier. Practice can, let's just face it, practice can suck sometimes. If we're practicing something and we're doing things over and over again, or we're trying something and it's just not going well, like when you do the improvement kata, by the way, if you've ever done improvement kata with a team, it's usually not till about the third or fourth time that they really start seeing improvements. Of going through, asking there's 5 questions you ask and you pose it when you get together with them, and where you want to go, where are you at now, what are the things you've tried, what's your next steps of things, and you go through this, and it's very repetitive, and honestly you can start feeling the lack of joy if you're not seeing the wins. So one of the things you want to do, like I said, do it in small bite-sized chunks. Make sure you can see some of the wins. And the other thing I've learned, like when I was doing the meat things, I try to do all those skills at once. I mean, those skills I broke down for you guys is the exact same things I did when I was making those briskets, and I try to do all those things at once, and got really frustrated. The first 2 times I got really frustrated because I was trying to make it all perfect, and so I stepped back and said, okay, because by the way, briskets aren't cheap, FYI, so practicing on it is not a cheap thing. So I went ahead and I said, well, let me just get the flavors right, and let me try to get the meat temperature right, and then I started going into other routes, and so I started, and then I started seeing some wins, and of course it got a little more fun when it starts working out. And then the last thing just to mention here about our brains is we got to remember the 20-second rule. And if you haven't heard of this guy named Sean Achor, who writes about happiness out of Harvard. He's actually his study is happiness in the workplace, how all that stuff impacts people. And he discovered and stumbled upon the psychological challenge of the 20-second rule, and that is that if it takes me more than 20 seconds to do it, I'm probably going to pick a path that doesn't take me 20 seconds. If I can find an easier way, I'm going to do that. Our brains do that naturally. So you got to remember that when we're practicing things. You got to remind yourself that, yeah, I'm in a mode of practice. I'm not going to be perfect. It's going to take me a little longer to do it. And I need to go ahead and just buckle up. And same thing coaching the teams. Just recognize if a team's trying something to learn something new, or we really want them to learn a new technique or skill set, encourage them to take the time to learn it. And they're going to get good at it and more efficient at it as we go, and not to try to take shortcuts. And I'll give you a coding shortcut. Coding shortcuts: go out and then grab snippets of code, and instead of trying to write stuff yourself and stuff like that, which is that's resourceful, and we can argue, probably get in an argument about that one. But I think people get a lot more joy when they create something themselves. All right. So a couple more tips here just on doing this. So I always point this out. I'm talking to teams about practice and stuff. First off, we have to have safety. Guys, this is part of that modern Agile. concept. Safety is both a physical thing, but also the mindset thing. So we have the psychological safety, but ultimately what it comes down to is I gotta feel safe to be able to do something. And to know that if I try something, I'm not going to destroy something, or hurt myself, for example. So you got to have some safety, and that leads into the next one where we have to have some practice space. And what that means, of course, if I'm doing something at work and I happen to be an engineer, or even for a product team, for example, if I'm a product owner, or product manager, and I'm working on something and I want to try out a new technique of discovery, maybe I do set the tone of that discovery session or that new brainstorming approach we're going to do and let everybody know, hey, look, guys, I've never done this before. So I want you to know that my expectation coming out of this session is that we're might not achieve my exact goals, but I think we're going to learn some better ways on how we talk about this topic, and lay that out there, and create that space. So it's up to us to create the space, both a physical opportunity as well as when we're working with people to set expectations to create space. And then, of course, the last thing, I say vision, and we've talked about the badass definition of badass, that having that in your head, but it's really great to have that mental model of what the success is going to look like, what it might look like at the end. And you see the guy dreaming about getting the #1 medal and everybody cheering for him, I guess. But the idea of what success, so it helps push you forward. So if you have that in your head, they talk about that helps drive grit, and that's one of the really core things to keep us trying, keep us moving forward. All right, so the last step. So guys, we went through 4 steps. Last step, and I'll summarize the steps here in just a second. The last step is associate with what good looks like. And so my pictures I have here for you guys. One is an orchestra, and good musicians try to be around other good musicians. They learn from other musicians. Now, I don't know if any of you guys are musicians, but musicians are very hard on themselves and they're very competitive. At least the ones I know that are very serious about it. And they want to be around other musicians that are, and learn from them, and kind of, again, it's kind of a competition, but it's also kind of an observation and learn from observation. So same thing kind of happens. I have here there's the observation deck in an operation room where sometimes they open it to pure public, but a lot of times these observation decks, they're open to students, they're open to other doctors to observe and learn from what's other doctors or activities other doctors are performing. So I would highly encourage you, if you have a context to get to badass, you can't just do it just through practice. This is Kathy refers to this as perceptual knowledge. If you've ever read The Pragmatic Programmer by Dave Thomas, he talks about it as this, masters move into intuition. Our knowledge, it becomes intuition. It becomes natural for us. And, I talk about this all the time with folks I work with regularly, is that as we start embedding and learning these things, eventually these things are become natural. And when we respond to a situation, we don't even realize we're responding that way. So it's one of those things where, again, it becomes perceptual knowledge, and we get that, we go over the hump by understanding what good looks like. One of the warnings that Kathy points out, and I totally agree with this, and I've experienced this myself, and it's down, hopefully you guys can see it about it on the bottom, avoid what bad looks like. So especially if you're teaching a team, or if you yourself are trying to do something, try to avoid what bad looks like. Because what I mean by that is, although we can learn from that, what that might lead us to do is might lead us to avoid trying something, because just as somebody tried it one way doesn't mean if you try it that way, it's going to always fail. So that creates this kind of confirmation bias that you can run into. So always try to focus on what the good looks like. She, of course, says it from a product perspective, so people always can visualize what it means to be successful. But we should do the same thing when we do learning, either ourselves or working with teams. So just to summarize for you guys, is the steps to badass. So again, going straight, I'm not going to tell you go buy the book, but if you do, it's going straight steps. Pull it out of there. Create that definition of badass for you in your context. Identify the skills to become an expert. So reflect on, look at what an expert does. And again, if you have that's the one area I have found that requires some level of research and learning. So you might have to do a little bit your own digging just to find out what those skills might be. Create a learning board. So track it, make your learning visible. And then of course start practicing. And of course we're talking about deliberate practice, right? And what I can encourage here is the two things. You're not practicing unless you're doing something that makes you feel a little uncomfortable. That's not, so to get, force yourself in a learning position. The other piece, and then there was that number 5 one. It was just make sure you're talking and you're looking for feedback from someone else who either is doing the same thing or maybe an expert in the area, somebody can help mentor you along. And then the last one, of course, is associate yourself with what good looks like. This is, another thing, example, I know right now, I think Danny and them are talking about communities of practice. Go attend a community practice, create your own community practice. Find just 2 or 3 people that have similar interests that you're trying to get better at, and associate with those folks and look for those opportunities of what good looks like. And then the last thing, I'll just close with this thought, guys. This is this talk, hopefully, as I've been trying to go through this today, this is both for the individual. I mean, this you as a person trying to get better at something, or, if you're working with a team of people or your team itself, try this technique. If you go out there and do a web search and you just do Badass, Kathy, Sierra, and teams, there's 2 or 3 other people out there that, kind of like myself, that said, wow, this technique, these are pretty common. I don't want to say common sense, but there's some really good structure of technique to how we can help pull people from, just focusing on just learning how to be an expert at a skill to actually really truly being badass and being proud about what they do. So that's what we're after. Are there any questions out there? Do we have any questions or any comments that you guys want to go through? Feel free to throw it out there in the chat. Otherwise, if not, that's all I got for today. And you can always throw questions out in the Slack channel. Cool. Thanks, Aileen. Thanks, Marguerite. And again, I hate to pitch a book, but it's a really good one. So I give a lot of credit, Kathy.
All right. If there are no other questions, we can go ahead and wrap. I will stop our recording for now.
All right. Thank you guys for coming.